mid-career for Beethoven. He starts writing these pieces for 4 trombones. No other accompaniment, just 4 trombones. And it says 3 equali. Equali meaning all the instruments are equal. Does anybody know the story of Beethoven and the trombone? We had a trombone player here. They know. Every time we have a trombone player, they know. Okay. Who was the first composer ever to use trombones in a symphony? A moment ago I said Handel's Messiah. There were no trombones, just trumpet. And then Mozart. There were no trombones. Mozart used 2 trumpets, 2 flutes, 2 oboes. Mozart introduced the clarinet. First composer to use clarinet in symphony was Mozart. And that's, you know that story, right? That he met the Statler brothers. They were very good. They were the ones that convinced him the clarinet was not a toy. So he wrote this real hard stuff, and they played it really well. It was great. It's an orchestral instrument. But who was the first composer to write trombones?
Wagner.
I know, that's why I threw it out there.
Oh. To give you a hint, it would probably be someone who, before they added it, might write some things for trombones to see how they sound. Come on, that's an obvious hint. Beethoven was the first composer to add trombones. And it was his 5th symphony. So what the equali were, these are not published, you know, opus number, first thing published, second thing published. This is woo, W-O-O, W small o capital O, without opus. Which I always like to call woo number, but it's actually without opus. So for it not to be published or anything like that, he just sat down and he was asking the question, well, if I add trombones, how many should I add? So he was obviously thinking of adding 4 trombones. He finally settled on 3, but he wrote some things for 4 trombones and got some people to play it so he could hear, you know, what's the quality of the trombone. So as we know now, the trombone has a lot of power and depth. So the trombones can play deep and they can play mid-range. So they could go lower than the French horns so your range of brass would be trumpets up here, French horns in the middle, then trombones at the bottom. And then much later they added tuba, but that expanded the range of the brass. Before Beethoven it was trumpets here and then horns, and you didn't have that low brass. So it makes sense. Do you play much Beethoven? Have you done any Beethoven sonatas? If you study Beethoven, you'll find that, well, what you have to do is play a piece by Mozart, play a piece by Haydn, play a piece by Beethoven. So you'll notice that Mozart's up here. And he can move down here. But when Mozart moves down here, it's still fairly light. But 2 things happened to Beethoven where he began to, down here, go, or kind of these deep, thick chords.
That was because he was losing his hearing.
Yeah, that was one. He began to lose his hearing, so he began to put more accents and loud things in the music. But actually, the other thing that happened, he probably would have done this anyway, we think, because of the piano. By the time the Beethoven piano came along, they had improved it a lot. It could play louder, it could do bigger accents. It wasn't that light thing that Haydn and Mozart were writing for anymore. So he could actually get quite a bit of sound out of the piano. And there was a third thing. One of Beethoven's teachers, anybody know Czerny? Czerny he was a great piano teacher. He was Beethoven's piano teacher when Beethoven was young. And nowadays you can buy these things called the Czerny studies, and they're like canon. They're just exercises for pianists. But when I was working on my degree, one of the teachers told me, look at Czerny's compositions, because we usually don't hear them. You buy this book of Czerny exercises, and once you've written a book of exercises, nobody wants to play your music. But I looked at the Czerny, and that's where Beethoven got this from. These low, thick chords. Czerny did it all the time. So Beethoven was a student of Czerny and kind of picked that up. And no one had been doing that before Czerny. But Czerny was not a famous composer. So it's not like when Beethoven started doing it, everybody said, oh, you got that from Czerny. They wouldn't have known Czerny any more than we would.
Would Czerny have been any good if they had given him a chance? I mean, was it, you say they didn't listen to him because he was a...
Oh, no, that's a joke about now.
But
It's
I mean,
like,
so he wasn't really good.
no, he was a good teacher, and he was a good player, but I mean, he wasn't great like Beethoven. He wasn't one of the greats. So, although, I don't know, at the time, people may have thought he was or something, but they thought that about Dittersdorf, Spohr, Ludwig Spohr, and all those others. Telemann, they thought was the greatest living composer. And now we know just an also ran. But that's okay. It's part of what you need to figure out who is great is history. And you just don't have that at the time. So Beethoven's piano writing is putting these loud, low, thick chords. So he's looking at his first four symphonies and saying, that's what I'm missing. But we don't have the instruments because the strings aren't going to get as loud. And the woodwinds aren't going to be powerful enough, so or low enough. So the trombone was around. Oddly enough, the trombone was used in orchestral music for requiem. The trombones doubled the singing parts. So when you wrote a requiem and you had a choir, SATB, singing PAYG or whatever, then the trombones would be doubling the vocal parts. So the singers could hear better. So it's not like they'd never heard them with an orchestra, but Beethoven was the first one who said, yeah, I'm just going to write a symphony that includes trombone.
The trombone was still the sack bucket back then, right?
No, sackbut is
sackbut.
Renaissance.
Okay.
The precursor of the trombone is the sackbut. It just looks like this kind of, not quite as long as a trombone, but it's got the slide and everything. And I wish we had a trombone player here. I have a great piece of trivia on it. Because the trombone has 7 positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
The one that's way out there,
Yeah.
almost off.
The sackbut has only 5. 2 levels.
Oh.
And that's just trivia. That when I was studying for my doctorate, a student asked me that, and I got it wrong. I was guessing the same as the trombone.
Is that because of the length of the slide?
I don't know why. It would have to be. I mean, it would have to be just that they only made the slide that long and it would fall out. Because, oh, well, it makes sense. It was Renaissance, so it was modal, not tonal.
Yeah.
So that last position is what gives you T, do, and it gives you the half step below do. So if they were modal, they would hardly ever need that. But anyway.
I have a friend that plays it, the trombone. I have a friend that plays it.
Yeah, ask them if they know what a sackbut is. What a precursor. And the sackbut, although it was made of metal, it must not have been very powerful, like the modern trombone made of brass, because they found duets for sackbut and violin. So have you ever heard of a duet for violin and trombone?
And trombone?
Yeah, trombone would kill. You'd never hear a violin over trombone. But I mean, that's just something that tells you something about the instrument. You can infer that either the violins were much louder back then, which I doubt, or the sackbut was much softer.
That's great.
So anyway, that's the trivia of this that he's writing. But look at the clefs again. First and second trombone reading the alto clef, third trombone reading the tenor, and then the bass clef. So I remember last semester Dr. Miller playing with some orchestra and saying they gave him something with it was so high it was in alto clef. He said, oh, it was Mahler. And Mahler is very taxing on the brass instruments. I don't know, maybe he didn't like